There is a hidden power in a story told with a soft voice and a steady, unwavering hand. Experience our smooth, cinematic narratives that whisper the truths the world has been trying to forget for centuries. Click subscribe now and listen to the soul of storytelling.
The night my in-laws threw me out, it was raining so hard I couldn't see the end of the driveway. I stood on the porch with one suitcase and a trash bag full of clothes, and my mother-in-law didn't even wait for me to reach the bottom step before she closed the door. No goodbye. No where will you go. Just the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place, and the rain, and me standing there wondering how I had gotten here. Let me take you back, because this story doesn't start with that night. It starts about 6 years earlier, in a small town in eastern Tennessee, where I was a 24-year-old elementary school teacher who had just fallen completely, stupidly in love. His name was Daniel. He was funny and warm and he laughed at everything I said, and I thought that meant he understood me. We dated for 2 years. He proposed on a Tuesday in a parking lot outside a Cracker Barrel, and I said yes before he even finished the sentence. I was that certain. His parents were a different story from the beginning. His father, a retired electrician, barely spoke to me the first 3 times we met. His mother did all the talking, which mostly consisted of questions that weren't really questions. So you're a teacher? That's sweet. Do teachers make enough to buy a house these days? Or, your family is from where exactly? I don't think I know that part of Kentucky. She said it the way you'd say you didn't recognize a particular brand of cereal. With mild, polite disdain. Daniel always said I was reading into it. She's just protective, he'd tell me. She's like that with everyone. But I noticed she wasn't like that with his brother's girlfriend, who came from a family with a lake house and a father who owned a car dealership. With her, his mother laughed freely and shared recipes and touched her arm when she talked. We got married anyway. Small ceremony, 40 people. A venue that used to be a barn. I wore my grandmother's earrings and I cried during the vows because I meant every word. For about 4 hours that evening. Everything felt exactly right. Then we moved in with his parents. It was supposed to be temporary. Daniel had been offered a position at a company 2 hours away, and we needed to save money before relocating. 3 months, maybe 4. That was the plan. His parents had a big house and an empty basement and it seemed practical. I want to be honest with you, I had doubts. I pushed them down because Daniel was excited, and I wanted to be a good sport, and I told myself that family was family and it would be fine. It was not fine. The first month, I tried hard. I helped with dinner. I offered to clean. I asked his mother questions about herself. About the town. About Daniel's childhood. Because I genuinely wanted to know. Sometimes she answered warmly. More often, she found a reason to leave the room. I started to feel like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. Except I had never really been welcomed in the first place. By the second month, I realized that the issue wasn't my effort. The issue was that his mother had decided something about me before I ever arrived, and nothing I did was going to change it. She thought I wasn't good enough. Not wealthy enough. Not from the right kind of family. Not the woman she had imagined for her son. And because she thought that, his father thought that. And because both of them thought that, the air in that house was thin all the time. I told Daniel. He listened. He said he talked to them. I don't know what he said or whether he said anything at all, but nothing changed. Then I found out I was pregnant. I sat in the bathroom on the basement level of that house for 20 minutes after reading the test, trying to figure out how I felt. I was scared. I was also, underneath the fear, quietly happy. Because Daniel and I had talked about children, and we both wanted them. And even if the timing wasn't what I'd planned, this was still something I had wanted. I told Daniel that evening. He hugged me and said he was happy. We agreed to tell his parents together over dinner the next night. I still remember what his mother was wearing. A pale blue cardigan. She had made pot roast. I remember thinking the timing felt wrong. But Daniel squeezed my hand under the table and nodded at me. So I said it. We have some news. We're expecting a baby. His father put down his fork. His mother's face did something complicated. A flicker of something that might have been genuine feeling, followed immediately by a tightening around her eyes. She looked at Daniel, not at me. "How far along?" she asked. "About 6 weeks," I said. She nodded slowly, like she was filing information. Then she said, very calmly, "We'll need to talk about the finances." That was it. No congratulations. No reaching across the table. Just finances. Later that night, I heard them talking through the floor above me. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard my name. And I heard the phrase, "Not what we planned for him." And I heard Daniel's voice go quiet in that particular way it did when he was backing down from something. Things moved fast after that. Within 2 weeks, his parents had decided, and somehow communicated to Daniel, and Daniel had somehow accepted, that the basement was not a suitable environment for a baby. That was true, incidentally. But the solution they proposed was not what I expected. His mother said they knew of a program, a kind of transitional housing arrangement for young families, subsidized by the county. She had printed out information. She slid it across the kitchen table to me like she was doing me a favor. I looked at Daniel. He was looking at the table. "You want us to move into transitional housing?" I asked. "Just until you're both more settled," his mother said. "It would be good for the baby to have a proper setup." I want to be very clear about what happened next, because I have replayed it many times. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I asked Daniel, quietly, in front of his parents, whether this was what he wanted. He said it might be for the best. Those were his exact words. It might be for the best. I went downstairs, packed the same suitcase I had brought when we moved in, filled a trash bag with the rest of my things, and I walked out of that house in the rain. Daniel came to the top of the stairs while I was packing. He said my name twice. I didn't answer. I wasn't punishing him. I was just out of words. I sat in my car at the end of the driveway for a while, not sure where to go. My parents were in Kentucky, 4 hours away. My closest friend had just moved to Seattle. I had work friends. But no one I could call at 11 at night and say, "I need a place to sleep." And also, my entire life has just shifted sideways. Then I thought of my sister-in-law. Daniel had a younger sister, Cara, 22 years old, finishing her last year of college 40 minutes away. We had always gotten along easily. She was nothing like the rest of her family. Sharp and funny and genuinely warm. The kind of person who remembered what you told her and asked about it later. She had visited us twice since we moved into her parents' house, and both times she had pulled me aside to say something kind, once to tell me she thought I was good for Daniel, and once just to say, unprompted, "For what it's worth, I see how hard you try." I called her from the end of the driveway. She picked up on the second ring. I said, "I'm sorry to call this late. I didn't know who else." She said, "Where are you right now?" I told her. She said, "Drive to me. I'll be up. I want to tell you something about Cara's apartment, because it matters." She lived in a 1-bedroom unit near campus that was roughly the size of a generous walk-in closet. She had a lofted bed, a desk with textbooks stacked 3 feet high, and a couch that folded out into something that was optimistically described as a full-size mattress. She gave me that couch, made it up with her good sheets, and handed me a glass of water and a piece of peanut butter toast at midnight without asking a single question until I was ready to answer them. When I told her everything, she listened without interrupting. At the end, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "My parents are going to say this was your choice. I need you to know that I know it wasn't." I cried then for the first time since leaving the house. I stayed on that pull-out couch for 6 weeks. Kara reorganized her entire life around me without ever making me feel like a burden. She cleared half her closet. She learned, quickly and without complaint, that I needed saltine crackers available at all times during the first trimester. She drove me to my prenatal appointment when my car was in the shop. She studied at the library 3 nights a week, so I could have the apartment quiet when the nausea was bad. She also, and I want to be careful here because I know what it cost her, stopped going home for family dinners. Her parents called her about it. She told me they did, though she never repeated exactly what was said. What I know is that she held her position. She visited them for holidays and birthdays and nothing else. And when they asked about me, she said only that I was doing well and changed the subject. Daniel and I were still technically married during this time. We texted sporadically. He said he was sorry. I believed he was sorry, in the way that people are sorry when they understand the outcome of something, but not the cause. We didn't talk about the baby much. He sent money occasionally, inconsistently, and I took it without comment because I needed it. I found a small apartment of my own when I was 5 months pregnant. A one-bedroom in a complex that allowed month-to-month leases, which was all I could commit to at the time. It wasn't much. The kitchen was narrow and the bedroom window faced a parking lot. But it was mine, and I had put it together myself. And there was something steadying about that. Kara helped me move in on a Saturday. We drove 2 truckloads from her place, and she stayed until 10 that night assembling a crib she had found on Facebook Marketplace for $40. When it was done, we stood back and looked at it and she said, "It's crooked." And I said, "It's perfect." And she laughed. And I laughed, and for the first time in months I felt something close to okay. My daughter was born in March. I named her Wren. She was healthy and loud, and she had a small crease between her eyebrows when she concentrated on anything, even as a newborn, that made her look like she was reading fine print. I loved her with a completeness I hadn't known was possible. I also won't lie to you. The first few weeks were the hardest of my life. I was alone in that apartment, healing, running on no sleep, learning to do everything for the first time, without anyone beside me. Kara came every weekend. Sometimes she came during the week. She held Wren so I could shower. She brought food. She answered my panicked texts at 2 in the morning when I was convinced something was wrong, and she was calm every single time. Even when I could hear in her voice that I had woken her up. I filed for divorce when Wren was 4 months old. Daniel didn't contest it. We agreed on child support through a mediator, a number that covered basics but not much beyond them. I went back to teaching when Wren was 12 weeks old, because I had used every day of my paid leave, and I had rent to pay. I found a daycare I trusted, which cost almost exactly what my groceries cost per month. I built a routine that was precise and exhausting and held together with almost no margin for anything to go wrong. For a year and a half, nothing dramatic happened. I want to tell you that part plainly, because I think it matters. It wasn't a year and a half of just surviving. It was also, in small ways, a year and a half of building. I got a better classroom. I had a student who struggled with reading all of September and was reading chapter books by December, and I have never been more proud of anything in my professional life. Wren learned to walk, holding on to the edge of the couch with an expression of absolute determination. That crease between her eyebrows deep with effort. Kara came for her first birthday, and we made a lopsided cake, and Wren put her entire fist into it. And we have a photo from that day that I will keep forever. I was getting there. Slowly, unevenly, but genuinely. Then, the letter arrived. It was from a family law attorney I had never heard of in a city 2 hours away. It stated that Daniel was petitioning for expanded custody, from the current arrangement of every other weekend to a full week-on, week-off split. The reason given was that he had recently relocated, was now in a stable living situation, and wished to be more involved in his daughter's life. The stable living situation, I found out later, was his parents' house. I sat down on my kitchen floor with that letter, and I read it 3 times. I wasn't angry right away. First, I was something quieter and colder than anger. I was genuinely frightened, not of Daniel specifically, but of a system I didn't fully understand, of legal fees I couldn't calculate, of the possibility that someone with more resources and family support behind them might be able to take more of my daughter's time than I could stop. I called Kara. She was at my apartment within an hour and a half. She sat across from me at my kitchen table and read the letter, and her face did something I had never seen it do. It went very still, the way faces do when someone is choosing their words with care. Then she said, "Okay, here's what we're doing. I'm going to pay for the first consultation with a family attorney. Don't argue with me." I argued with her. She didn't move. She paid for the consultation. The attorney, a woman named Miss Peering O'Coffer, who had short natural hair and a manner of speaking that made complex things feel orderly, told me that a change of custody required demonstrating that the current arrangement was no longer in the child's best interest. She asked me detailed questions about my work schedule, my home, my support system, Ren's daycare, her health, her routine. She took notes without visible reaction. At the end she said, "You have a strong case for maintaining primary custody. The relocation to his parents' household is actually a complicating factor for his petition, not a supporting one." Then she looked at me carefully and said, "I want to represent you. My retainer is $1,500. $1,500. $1,500. I had 400 and some change in my savings account. I told Kara that evening. She was quiet. Then she said, "I have money from my graduation gifts that I haven't touched. I've been saving it for something that mattered. This matters." I said, "Kara, I can't." She said, "You can pay me back whenever. Or don't. But Ren is my niece, and this is not a conversation we're having." I paid Ms. Okafor's retainer the next morning. What followed was 4 months. I do not enjoy remembering. Not because things went badly, but because the sustained uncertainty of a legal process is its own particular kind of exhausting. There were documents to file, affidavits to write, a home study scheduled and completed. I cleaned my apartment with a thoroughness that probably violated some law of physics. I wrote a statement about my daughter's daily life, her diet, her friendships at daycare, her sleeping habits, what she called her stuffed rabbit, the way she said, "Watch this," before doing anything she was proud of. The hearing was on a Wednesday in November. I wore a gray blazer I had bought specifically for the occasion and couldn't eat breakfast. Kara sat in the gallery. She had taken a personal day from the job she had started 6 months earlier, her first real position after graduation, without telling me she was planning to. Daniel's parents were there too. His mother wore the same pale blue cardigan. I don't want to dramatize what happened, because in truth, courtrooms are procedural and slow and nothing like television. What I will tell you is that Ms. O'Coffer was methodical and precise, and made the judge's job easy. She demonstrated the consistency of my routine, the quality of my daughter's care, the absence of any evidence that the current arrangement was failing Ren in any observable way. The judge ruled in favor of maintaining primary custody with me. She also reviewed the existing child support order and, finding that it had not been adjusted since the original agreement, despite documented changes in Daniel's income, she modified it retroactively. I learned the amount in the parking lot afterward when Ms. Okafor handed me a printout, back pay of over $40,000, and an increased monthly figure going forward. I stood next to my car in that parking lot and read the number twice, and then I looked up at the sky, which was very gray and ordinary, and I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So I did a small version of both. Kara found me standing there. She looked at my face and said, "Good news." I handed her the paper. She read it. She made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Then she grabbed my arm with both hands and said, "You need a house." I said, "I need a house." We stood there in the parking lot laughing like people who have just been through something and come out the other side and can finally afford to find it funny. I want to tell you what happened next, because I think it's the part that actually means the most. I found a small house, 3 bedrooms, which felt enormous after years of one, in a neighborhood with a good school district and a park 2 blocks away. I bought it. I had never bought anything that large in my life, and I sat at the closing table with my hands folded very carefully in my lap, so no one would see them shaking. The 3rd bedroom was for Kara. I had asked her, and she had said yes before I finished the question. She had been living with 2 roommates in an apartment she had outgrown, and the commute to her job from my new neighborhood was actually slightly shorter. The practical reasons were real. But we both knew that wasn't really why. She moved in on a Saturday in February. Ren, who was almost 2 by then, walked in circles around Kara's boxes saying, "Kara's stuff," in the serious tone of someone cataloging inventory. We were unpacking the kitchen when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it. It was my mother-in-law. I hadn't spoken to her since the night I left her house in the rain, which was almost 3 years earlier. Her voice was different, quieter, and something else I couldn't immediately name. She said she had heard I had won the custody case. I said yes. She said she wanted to say that she was sorry, that she had handled things badly, that she knew I was a good mother and she had known it for a while but hadn't known how to say it, and that she understood if I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't say anything for a moment. Kara was watching me from across the kitchen with a dish towel in her hand. I thought about what I wanted. Not what I was supposed to want, not the gracious response, but the actual thing I wanted. And what I realized, standing in my kitchen in my new house with my daughter playing in the next room and Kara watching me with quiet, steady eyes, was that I was not angry anymore. I had been angry for a long time, a cold, load-bearing anger that I had needed to get through certain days. But somewhere in the previous year it had quietly finished its job and stepped aside, and what was left was not warmth exactly, but an absence of the need to hold on to something. I said, "I appreciate that. I think it's going to take some time." She said she understood. I said, "Ren has a grandmother on her father's side. That matters to me. I'm not going to close the door permanently, but I need things to be different." There was a pause. Then she said, "Yes, I understand that." We talked for 11 more minutes. I know because I checked my phone after we hung up. It wasn't a resolution, and I'm not going to tell you it was. It was the beginning of a long and careful thing that I don't have a clean name for yet. When I hung up, Kara tilted her head and said, "His mother?" I said yes. She said, "Are you okay?" I thought about it honestly. I said, "Yeah, I actually am." She nodded and handed me a stack of plates, and we went back to unpacking the kitchen. Ren came in from the other room dragging her stuffed rabbit and said, "What doing?" In the imperious way 2-year-olds ask about things they intend to supervise. Kara picked her up and perched her on the counter, and Kara said, "We're making Miss a home." And Ren looked around the kitchen with that concentrated expression, the small crease between her eyebrows, and apparently decided this was satisfactory. I want to end here. Not because everything is finished, but because this is the part I want to stay in for a moment. Not the victory. Not the money. Though the money mattered enormously, and I am not going to pretend it didn't, not even the house, though the house is more than I imagined I would have at 29. The part I want to stay in is this. My daughter, on the counter, holding her rabbit. My sister-in-law standing beside her. Both of them looking around the kitchen like it's already theirs. The sound of the rain starting outside. Soft this time. Just rain. And me standing in the middle of it all, holding a stack of plates, feeling like I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Sometimes the door that closes in the rain is not the end of something. Sometimes it is the first step toward the house you were always supposed to find on your own.